Okay, cool. Audio's good? Okay, so, hello, we're a little bit behind schedule already, so I'll try and put the customer success stories with Zowe. Okay, so what I wanted to do for this is quite a quick talk. I just wanted to quickly rattle through a little bit of the history of Zowe and the customer success stories that I've seen, and we're going to hear from some of the people as well who've got some video clips. So, Jason asked a question about where people were in 2007. People remember where they were in 2017? Where they were last night? Or something? Yeah, just like that. So we're in Las Vegas. So actually this was 2018, I think, wasn't it, John? This was when you were at Share in St. Louis, and you were on stage there with executives. It's Greg Locker from Computer Associates, that was then called, it's now Broadcom. Barry Baker from IBM, kind of scratching his nose, Andy Eunice from Rocket Software, making a big commitment to the Zowe project without really knowing anything about how successful it would be or where it would go. And the very first design camp that we had with Zowe, we picked 3 sort of keywords that we wanted to always use as our North Star: open, simple, and familiar. And that was how we wanted to kind of transform the whole mainframe experience by sort of hybridizing it with a lot of what Linux Foundation could bring to us. Zowe celebrated the 5-year anniversary recently, and this is a chart from actually Greg Locko, who I think is a Mainframe GM at Broadcom Software, was really acknowledging the 5 years of Zowe. John stole a bit of my thunder talking about this chart here, but this is really important. So one of the hard things we have about Zowe is that you can download Zowe from zowe.org, but we don't really track where it goes. We don't really know that much about its usage. So we don't have salespeople selling it. Where we know how they're being compensated by traditional IBM, what our install footprint is, so we have to do it through other ways. Now, Zowe did start in 2018, but it only really started for me in about March the 2nd, I think, when we released version 1 long-term support. Up until then, it was just a kind of perpetual beta, bunch of downloads, people installed it, but it wasn't really there, it wasn't really baked. That was the point at which enterprise support was offered. And to track it has since, so the Arcati Mainframe Yearbook, if you get the slides, that's the link to where it is. They basically survey, I think, 100 or plus mainframe customers across different demographics, different geographies, to try and work out where they're going and what they're using. And they added a question in the 2020 yearbook that just simply said, are you using Zowe? And 10% of people came back and said yes. So that was good, that sort of charted us. So that then went on to 19%, sort of double-digit growth. And there was another question added in 2021 which said, do you intend to use Zowe? And that was a huge number, that was 50%. So that comes up to about 70%. And that's a huge number of mainframe customers, because often at any point in time, the number that's actually doing any modernization that's close to maxing out that, right? Because a lot of mainframe customers aren't actually doing any modernization. Perhaps they've outsourced it, they're taking a slightly different posture. And in 2022, when it was done looking back, that increased to 38%. But interestingly, the number that still intend to use it, that's decreased, but the sum of that still hit 70%. So that's a really good chart. So these are the 4 use cases I've covered: education, DevOps, SDK, and DB2. So education is really, really important. So can folks remember March 2022? Anything interesting happened in March 2022? Is when COVID started, and the world was in lockdown. And I was at Share in Dallas, Fort Worth, where we launched version 1, and literally we were checking our apps saying, are we going to get back to the UK without being stuck in a hotel for 2 weeks for quarantine? Very frightening time for everybody with COVID. But the one thing that Zowe benefited from was basically the fact that COBOL. There was a big need for COBOL development. And there was a news story that no folks can remember. I think it was Phil Murphy, governor of New Jersey. He basically, his systems, all went pear-shaped. They all balked. And he said, because they're mainframe-based, COBOL sucked, Yahoo sucked. And that turned into a positive news story because COBOL programmers were in demand to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Right? People needed a superhero to come in from an IT perspective and kind of save mankind. And you can see some of that when this is Indeed. They chart, I think the green line is jobs being listed, and the other one is resumes, and it's a kind of classic sort of capitalist supply and demand. And it just spiked literally through the wazoo in like March 2007, because everybody was like, we need COBOL developers, we need COBOL skills. Now fortunately, whether by accident or by design, I'm not quite sure, but Sudarshan was in the room and a few others had already created and Meredith's in the room as well, the COBOL Open Mainframe Project COBOL training course. And this was, the title of my slide says, wrong place, right time. Nobody wished pandemic on the world, but we needed something available at that point in time, and the OMP COBOL course was like right there at the time. This is the first success story that Zowe really had. And I actually asked ChatGPT, interestingly, sorry, one more slide here. So the Open Mainframe Project COBOL programming course, when it first GA'd, there is no green screen in there. You learn how to create COBOL using Visual Studio Code, using the Zowe Explorer, which is the plugin to Visual Studio Code. Interestingly, through the pandemic, I actually taught myself COBOL. I'm not a COBOL developer, I learned it during the pandemic, and I joined something called COBOL Fridays. Everybody was locked at home during the pandemic, they wanted to get together, create communities, connect with their tribes, and you had, and I think John and Jason talked about it, like older professionals, early professionals, very diverse community, all connecting online. And as I learned COBOL using the same technology that the Zowe Explorer got creating. So this whole generation of people in the pandemic learning COBOL, relearning COBOL, where cats had been furloughed, they were at home, they were virtually trying to work with companies, they were learning it through Visual Studio Code. And all of these material is out there, it's all on YouTube, you can go and search for it, and it's all based around the Zowe Explorer. It is the most popular Open Mainframe Project Slack channel. I think that's 6,000 users. You can learn on Coursera, IBM Digital Learning Platform, I think Pluralsight. That's a wonderful quote there from Dr. Cameron CA. If any of you know Cameron, he's a phenomenal advocate on LinkedIn for everything, and he says, it may come as no surprise to you, some of my COBOL students are perplexed and ticked off that they were introduced to Zowe so late in the course. And then he acknowledges Sudarshan, who's in the room, Paul Newton and a few others. So what he's saying there, he's a phenomenal, I don't know how old he is, he's a phenomenally wise gentleman. I think he might even be in his 70s. He's been teaching COBOL throughout his entire life at HBCUs, and he's pivoted his entire course to be around Zowe Explorer based. Nobody told him to do that, it was just the right thing, and I suppose what he's saying there is his students actually wanted to do that. And I've got a quick quote from William Christensen at Bank Data. The other big thing that we saw was students who were learning through the COBOL course, when they were being hired by companies, they were pivoting those companies to start using Zowe as a tool. Let's see if this audio plays. Oh, sorry. You couldn't hear that, could you? I'll try one more time and I'll hold my microphone down. You probably couldn't hear any of that, could you? Do you want to try and play it again, or no? I'll just do it again, John. Sorry, we're going a little bit tender. Let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. Okay, I'll carry on just because we're on the agenda. So what we're saying here is saying, if we can take a developer, tell them, here's the Open Mainframe Project COBOL course, do it, use Visual Studio Code. This is things they already know, the learning curve is flat and they don't have to adjust to a new interface. That's the F, that's the familiar. Huge success story at Bank Data. And the other pivotal thing that occurred was, how many people in the room have heard of a training course that used to be called Master the Mainframe? Or maybe done it, there's a few folks. Okay, that's great, Stephen and Tim and others, thanks for that. So IBM had a training course from starting in 2004 all the way to 2019. They celebrated 15 years, and I've got some screenshots here, they're a little bit dark. They were teaching people mainframe skills using ISPF, STSF, traditional 32 emulators. The first thing that the course said was download an emulator and then get going. And there's some screenshots from sort of online. That pivoted in 2020, around the same time that OMP came out to be based upon Visual Studio Code, Zowe Explorer, Zowe CLI, other technologies as well like Ansible. You learn all of those within the course, Python. And the other interesting quote that I had here, and I pulled it off social media, just got Zowe with Visual Studio Code at work, having used it before I got hired to learn the mainframe via Z Explore, which is what it's now called. First cool trick was using it. What we're finding is that students and early professionals who are going through these training courses are hiring and they're transforming their companies. It reminds me a little bit of when I first learned Windows and then joined companies that didn't use Windows. It was very grassroots. You know, that's how Microsoft Windows 3.1 really sort of tipped the world away from OS 2, which I probably shouldn't say because I work for IBM as my employer, but that kind of grassroots thing, it's how games have become viral, it's how videos become viral. People pick it up, and there's Jeff Bisty, who was very pivotal in that course, and lots of videos. Again, they're all on YouTube. You don't have to read IBM Red Books to find it out with all these static screenshots. It's a very kind of modern delivery mechanism. Interskill, you talk about Interskill. Interskill had a training course, a badge called Zowe Fundamentals. Is Darren in the room? Or not? Okay. So this was the #1 issued mainframe badge that they've ever issued. Right, of all the badge, they took people kicks and DB2 and everything possible on the platform. It's the #1 badge, and as John said, that's now changed to be a collaboration with Open Mainframe Project, and that's a quote. I just pulled this actually, Stephen, off your Discord channel. I just started using the badge tonight. Really well done so far. And if you look at this sort of picture of the face in there, you know, that's an experienced mainframer, right? This is not just for kids. It's not a toy. What you're learning here is being sort of recognized across the industry. I was at a conference recently and I saw a quote from, it was actually in Norway, in Oslo, so it's quite far east in Europe. And this is a lecturer called Johannes Samanicus at the University of Vilnius in Lithuania. And these were the quotes that he had. 3270 scares off younger generation. I didn't want to make it a flame war about that. Zowe the way forward. And he said, inclusion of open source tools sped up the learning process. And he had actually tracked that throughout his entire time, that once he put Zowe, once he put Visual Studio Code in, he found more students at his university were registering for the mainframe in his faculty, and more were sticky, and more were succeeding, and more were getting jobs. Okay? Just looking at the time a little bit. DevOps is our next success story. Just going to click a few things. I won't play this quote from Stephen just because I didn't put my audio to work, but what Stephen is saying, Stephen works for the Lloyds Banking Group, and what he said was a couple of things. I'm not being funny, but when you see a TN3270 session for the first time, they're kind of like, what the heck is this? Could we bring them something a bit more modern? There was already a few people within the organization who were looking at the Zowe command line interface, and these were people that Lloyds Banking Group had hired who had learned it from the education courses. Okay, so they actually collaborate very closely with a local university. So you've got that training feed, you've got these 20-year-olds coming in, full of energy, coming into a sort of incumbent, very powerful financial services company, and saying, I've got these new tools, let's have a look and let's do transformation. Okay, and this is the kind of thing that people do with the Zowe command line interface. It means that if you're working on your laptop and you wish to power 29 different tools there's some clever authentication methods in the middle, you can just write a shell script that's familiar to you. And what I've got the quote here from it's a Portuguese customer. I don't actually have permission to put their name on here, but I do for the slide. And this is a very typical DevOps architecture you've got, where you've got DevOps pipelines running in familiar technology like Jenkins. They're using tools like ServiceNow. They're using Artifactory, and they're all writing script languages, and they're trying to drive the mainframe systems. And that's very, very common that we see in the DevOps space. Backdata have a very similar one as well. And Zowe then won the Best Mainframe DevOps Solution Award in 2021 and 2022. And that's that curve where we're getting 19%, 38% usage. We've got a few quotes here about people saying that they use Zowe for DevOps. Cool, I'm just going to speed up a little bit. The fourth one is software development kit. I won't be able to play this clip again because my audio is not working, but this is Suresh Amagaran, who unfortunately was going to be here today, but he couldn't make it. He's from Nordea, and they're basically using Zowe. And what they're doing is they're using. Let me go back a little bit more. I might try and explain this. So, because Zowe is 100% open source, it has a Visual Studio Code plugin. That's our Zowe Explorer. That was really made, popular through the COBOL education, IBM Z Explore. Hugely popular. It just passed 100,000 unique downloads actually last week, which is amazing. It's got 500,000 actual total downloads because people, the Visual Studio Code Marketplace tracks when you download it and then when you upgrade it as well. So that's like 100,000 desktops on mainframe sites are using that. The command line interface, it shares a lot of common code, and it's actually written in Node, and because it's fully open source, what people do is they take those packages and they just roll their own stuff on top. They're like, this is really good, but we want to create our own applications on top, and that's the software development kit. That's hugely popular, and what they've gone and done at Nordea is they've created their own custom dashboards using Node Express, leveraging that to render data. So and that's just what it looks like. We've got some commands up there for developers. It's the software development kit. And I've got a few screenshots. This is from another customer. This is a Spanish customer. And they're going to permission to use these, but I can't say who they are. But what they had is they had older incumbent applications that they've written internally, and they've just started to write those all within, they've got a developer portal, it's written within Node Express, and they're using their same software development kit that powers the back end behind an interface and behind the Zowe Explorer. We've got another example here. That last one was a Node Express application, and this is that old ISPF traditional desktop UI. It's for internal deployment only at this particular bank, and then they've written some Visual Studio Code plugins to extend the Zowe Explorer. So you're seeing people basically not ordering things off the menu, they're kind of going back, getting the raw ingredients, and then making their own dishes. And the very last one, try and catch up the time, is DB2. Are there any DB2 customers in the room? Great, thank you, sir. DB2. I love the way your hand went up. They're like, yes, DB2 all the way. Thank you, sir. So DB2 is the database, relational database, transactional database for a ZOS platform. Hugely popular, hugely powerful backend database. I think. Anyway, I'll get the numbers wrong, but it's just fast. It just runs the financial backbone of the world. So what's interesting about DB2 was there's something called the Zowe Desktop. It's this kind of fourth big component in Zowe, I suppose, and that's a web browser-based user interface. So one of the problems with any tool in a kind of client-server world is if you're trying to administer a backend and you have to install something on your client, that's going to get stale. You have to have the right version for the right backend. You might want to connect to multiple backends. It's much better. If you think of our experience when we connect to a bank or do shopping or something, we just go to their website and the server always serves up, the freshest and the correct user experience for that version of the server that we're connecting to. So the Zowe Desktop, this is what it looks like in its sort of raw form. You sign on. It comes with some great built-in apps. It's like an iPhone or a games platform. It has a 3270 emulator that's very popular. That just runs in your browser. It has some file editors, but it's extensible. You can get additional apps for it. So within, I might click this, there's no sound on that video, but I'll just let it play. When DB2 version 13 came out, DB2 had some existing system administration tools called DB2 Data Studio and DSM Data Server Manager. Those were effectively sort of deprecated. They'd always been a little bit stale, but they're unable to work with DB2 version 13. So I spend an awful lot of my time now visiting customers, joining WebExes. I've actually got 5 international trips in October for customers that I need to go to because they're installing DB2 13. They're trying to stand up this new technology stack. This is very, very recent. This is DB2 Administration Foundation. I think that's an embedded video. I don't know what's not playing. Maybe I have space for you. I'm sorry about this. I'm just having a lot of problems with my. Anyway, it's got Visual Explain. It's a very, very modern Angular application for DB2, and it's really growing the Zowe footprint because it's a prerequisite for anybody doing modern DB2 administration. And there's some extension products on top. And we're seeing it all over the place. This is Segis Engineering. They're a big, they have applications they built on top of Zowe. They had a workshop that they ran recently. In May, I joined their workshop. There are 40 huge European customers, all learning DB2 through these DB2 Admin Foundation, which means that Zowe is going to be installed. There's the IDUC, which is the DB2 sort of user community, and there's lots of blogs, and I'm actually going to Prague to the IDUC conference, presenting like 3 different talks, 2 with customers talking about DB2 and Zowe. That was very, very quick. And my audio was terrible. Sorry about that, because I couldn't get it.